Hi, Jerry. Welcome. Good evening. Okay, great. We're going to start a class. We're going to review very quickly what we saw last class. So we are in the listening section, right? Okay. So basically here, we're just going to review how it's organized to remember a little bit. Remember, for the reading and the listening, you're basically going to have one extra that is going to be underscore. So basically, one of them is not going, the extra one is not going to be a score. Okay. So basically, that's what how it's going to be organized. The time for the reading, it's 54 minutes. We get 10 questions per each task. We get 3 tasks if we don't get a score one and a score one. In the listening, we're going to get two or three, 2 conversations and 3 lectures, and we get 5 questions per each conversation and 6 questions per each lecture. Okay, so just remembering a little bit of that. In the case of we get an extra reading one or listening, sorry, we're going to get 7 tasks. So that means an extra conversation and an extra lecture, which will increase the amount of the questions and the time that we're going to get. In the case of getting a reading an extra underscore reading task, we will get an extra passage and we will get more questions. Okay, 10 questions more. Okay, just so you remember. In the listening, we basically have a 45 minutes total to answering this section, and you cannot go back to answer. You don't get stuck while you're answering. Here, sorry, we are going to start with the first type of question. The main idea, basically here, we are going to try to find the main topic of the conversation, and that is always going to be in the first part of the listening or the explanation. And we basically have to find out what is the professor mainly discussing. Okay, hi Andrea, welcome. Then also we can get a question like, why does the student go to speak to, no, about certain topic. Also, as I said already, the main idea is always going to be stated in the beginning of the conversation. Okay, so that after this type of question, which is always going to be the first one, then we get a question type 2, function and organizational question. Basically here in function, we get to listen again the audio, all the conversation or the lecture. And for this type of question, we have to find or understand the context of the conversation. And for this will be helpful to have great notes. As I already mentioned last class, the best thing to do is that is while we are taking our notes, forget about the vocals. Hi Marita, welcome. Then we have organizational type of question, which is going to be asked. They're going to ask us about how is organized the audio. So also we can record to our notes to find the information. Okay, so we basically are going to get maybe 1 or 2 of these questions, not more than that, and one of the main idea question. Okay, in the first type of question, attitude and inference, they mostly are going to be about this. So this type of questions, we have to understand what is being said. So we have to pay attention to all the audio. Okay, And basically here we have to pay attention how the person is speaking about the topic, no, or what is the context of the conversation. It's going to be, the question is going to go towards the attitude of the speaker. So it's not, we're not going to find the answer in our notes, okay? So basically we have to kind of like get into the speaker's head. After that, well, another type of question is inference. Here we have to kind of find out information that is not necessarily being said from the lecture. What can be, well, it's going to sound something like, from the lecture, what can be inferred about certain topic? Why does the professor imply when he says this? Or what will the student probably do? So it's basically to try to find out some certain information, or maybe make some maybe guess a little bit about what is going to happen next, okay? And we have to use logic to answer this type of question, okay? So that's important. Follow your instinct, and no, try to think about the whole thing instead of some certain details, okay? Inference. Then it's going to sound something like answer according to what you have been asked to respond. Okay, aquí no hay que perdernos mucho en la pregunta, o hay que prestar atención bien, no nos dejemos llevar por los detalles, ¿no? Porque la pregunta a veces puede sonar un poco tricky. Entonces aquí hay que prestar atención a exactamente qué es lo que nos pide, porque es fácil que nos vayamos y nos distraigamos y nos vayamos por otro lado, digamos, ¿ok? Entonces hay que tomar en cuenta un poco eso, ¿no? Some details from early in the beginning of the recording. And well, don't get triggered, no sé, don't get overwhelmed. Puede sonar como una pregunta tal vez un poco complicada, pero cuando se entiende bien la pregunta, no es tan complicada como parece. Entonces, no se sientan unencouraged while you are doing this type of question, ¿okay? Porque aparte la mayoría de las preguntas van a ser inference, ¿ok? Ahora vamos a ver, after doing this short summary about all the type of questions, tal vez antes, perdón, si hay alguna pregunta por aquí, antes de pasar al siguiente punto. Todavía no estamos practicando, ¿no es cierto? Estamos viendo simplemente las preguntas. Entonces estamos introduciendo todavía. Ahora vamos a saltar, si es que alguien tal vez ya ha tomado o ya se ha inscrito, me puede mencionar, por favor. Vamos a ver los pasos para inscribirnos. Les voy a pasar el link por el chat, si quieren revisar, para ir bien tal vez a la par mientras vamos haciendo el ejercicio de cómo inscribirse. Ok, entonces yo les voy a compartir mi pantalla. Ok, there. Sorry. Okay, so if you click on the link that I just sent, you're going to be directed to this page. And here we have to create our ETS account. Okay, entonces la inscripción siempre se va a hacer a través de la cuenta principal de ETS. Entonces aquí, alguien tal vez, si me puede mencionar, if you already have an account. ¿Alguien tal vez? ¿O nadie? Andrea, do you have an account yet? Marita, Diego, Larry. Ok. Entonces aquí es bastante sencillo. Les voy a guiar un poco, pero es muy instintivo. Okay. Entonces entramos aquí, cuenta. We have someone new. Hi, Camila, welcome. Okay. Hi, Camila. Okay, great. Here, basically, what we have to go is to click here, create an account. Nos vamos aquí, crear una cuenta, ingresamos. Y no se preocupen si es que se pone así un poco lento, es normal, es un poco pesada. Voy a cerrar algunas páginas. Ok, entonces acá, para crear la cuenta, tenemos que llenar con toda nuestra información. Entonces no lo voy a hacer porque yo ya tengo una cuenta, pero es bastante instintiva. Es básicamente ir llenando nuestros datos y nos pide bastante información, muy detallada. Entonces acá el consejo que les puedo dar, ¿no? Pongan solo su primer nombre. Si tienen 2 nombres, solo pongan el de pila, ¿no? El apellido, middle name lo pueden dejar en blanco, no hay problema aquí. Apellido, pueden poner ambos apellidos, no hay problema. Llenamos la información, date of birth, gender, y aquí su correo personal. ¿Ok? Después en address, ¿no? ¿Dónde viven? Detallen la información, ciudad, etcétera, su teléfono y, bueno, si tiene algún código, qué sé yo. Entonces, aquí ustedes deciden si es que quieren o no que se les envíe información. Luego van a pasar y básicamente les va a preguntar un poco más de ustedes. En el caso de que tal vez ustedes vivan, sean de un país y vivan en otro, ahí lo van a detallar, ¿no? Les va a decir lugar, país de nacimiento, etcétera. Entonces son básicamente 3 páginas. Obviamente no me va a dejar pasar porque no estoy llenando, pero es para llenar con calma, ¿ya? Si tienen problemas para llenar o crear su usuario, me dicen, pero es bastante sencillo, ¿no? Aquí simplemente, como ven, aquí esos son los pasos. Personal information, adicional, perdón, ahí llenan un poquito más de su fecha de nacimiento, lugar de nacimiento, país de nacimiento. Y luego aquí les va a hacer crear, ¿no? un username, un password. Siempre traten de anotarlo en algún lugar por si acaso. Y luego les va a dar la opción de darle un pequeño review a toda la información que están mandando para ver si en efecto es correcta. Y luego le dan clic a Next y les van a mandar un correo de inscripción al correo que pusieron. Y simplemente se dirigen a su correo y le dan clic a verificar cuenta, ¿ya? Y les va a mandar nuevamente a la página principal, ¿ok? Entonces, una vez que entren a la página principal, que es la que les mandé, como les dije, siempre pasa, no se van a asustar. No sé si es el internet o que es muy pesada esta página. Vamos a volver acá, bueno, y ver cerrando esto. Okay. Entonces voy a cuenta y test y ahí voy a llenar nuevamente mis datos, ¿ok? Voy a poner mi nombre de usuario, mi contraseña y luego les voy a indicar cómo inscribirse. Bueno, aprovecho. ¿Hay alguno que va a tomar el TOEFL en casa? ¿Hay alguien por ahí que vaya a tomar en casa? A ver, tal vez Andrea, ¿vas a tomar tu examen en casa o lo vas a hacer en una institución?
I don't know yet, but maybe it could be, yeah, in the home,
Okay,
the IBT.
The home edition, right? Okay. What about Marita? Are you going to take it in an institution or the home edition?
No, in an institution. I think I will concentrate better.
Okay, great. What about Camila? Camila, are you going to take the home edition or you're going to take it an institution at your city?
I'm not completely sure because I was thinking to take it in like an institution, but maybe I will change my mind. Right now, I'm not completely sure.
Okay. It's advised for you guys to take it at home, the home edition, because it's not like cheating, but you could use your computer if you're not sure about a word, you can translate it, you know. If you're taking it an institution, you're not going to be able to do that. But if you want to, I will advise you guys to take the home edition. Okay. Now we're going to. Okay, Christian, what about you? You're going to take the home edition, right? You already mentioned that.
Yes, teacher. I want to take the home edition.
Okay, great. So we're going to see how to schedule the test. Well, the TOEFL for in both ways. Okay. So what I already did was basically just to create an account. Okay. He confirmado mi cuenta ¿Cómo puedo crear mi cuenta? Le voy a pasar a Cristian nuevamente el link y continuamos, ¿ok? Lo estoy pasando por el chat. Y ahí crean su cuenta y luego les va a mandar un correo y les va a mandar nuevamente esta página. ¿Ya? Lo único que haces ahí, Cristian, es, si no te has creado cuenta aún, es create an account. Y te va a mandar, llenas tus datos y nuevamente vuelves a esta misma página y pones tu usuario y pones tu contraseña. Okay, after that we go sign in and then it's very easy to register. So we just go here. It's highlighted here, register, find test center's date, and we click on here. Then we have the opportunity to choose between test center or home edition. So we're going to see the test center. I was looking up this before the class. And I hope you have your test later this year because I think they're not, well, I think it really depends of the city, right? But, por ejemplo, para Cochabamba lo que yo estaba viendo es que no hay muchos exámenes pronto, así que ojo con eso. Creo que ahí me bloqueó, pero vamos a ver. Okay. So if you want to take the test, here, now we have some, not too many, right? Dates. Eso depende de la disponibilidad de los centros, ¿no es cierto? Entonces, como ven, no hay muchos. Entonces, si van a tomar una institución, ya vayan, y lo necesitan, ¿no? Para su beca, etcétera, scholarship, háganlo ya pronto. Entonces, lo que hacemos básicamente es seleccionar, ¿no? La fecha. Aquí nos va a dar dos opciones, bueno, en mi caso, en Cochabamba. Y le doy aquí Show Test Times and Register. Y luego le doy otra vez clic a Register. Y me va a mandar la opción aquí, ¿no? Y me va a ir diciendo cómo hacerlo. Entonces, aquí no tengo la opción de escoger un horario ni nada por el estilo. Simplemente ya me está dando, ¿no? Me dice el horario, me dice la fecha, me dice dónde. ¿Ok? Ahorita van a ver en el Home Edition cómo es. Es más amplio porque obviamente yo decido. Entonces, aquí básicamente lo que nos va a ir mandando es, ¿no? Simplemente nos está explicando un poquito, ¿no? Del payment, accommodations, ¿no? Toda la información que deberíamos saber, que pueden ir revisando. ¿No? Basically, todo es prácticamente para aceptar, ¿no? Pueden dar una revisada si quieran, pero básicamente es información legal, ¿no? Que ellos deben hacernos conocer. Go next. Enter ID information. Esto es importante aquí, si hay alguien que sea de otro país, recuerden que aquí tienen que introducir una información que tenga usted el respaldo, digamos que en su documento de identidad está tanto su imagen, su foto, como su número de identificación y sus datos, su nombre completo. Entonces, si no está en diferentes caras, digamos, del documento, tal vez les va a impedir un poquito registrarse. Entonces, en ese caso pueden utilizar su pasaporte. ¿Ok? Entonces ahí, ¿no? Seleccionan el país. Vamos a llenar porque no me va a dejar sino continuar. Pongo el número. Igual, aquí repito, en mi caso, tal vez hay algunas personas que no, ¿no? Su nacionalidad. Lo mismo. Ok, luego aquí, si no tienen, ¿no? Aquí, la información que les decía, ¿no? La pueden pasar. Utilizando esta otra, igual les va a dejar. Pasamos a next. And here, no, they're going to give us the information, ¿no? For the profile information. Si hay algo que quiera cambiar, me da la oportunidad. I go next. Background information. Esto igual se llena básicamente, ¿no? Yo lo había llenado antes, así que se me llena automáticamente. Pero esto simplemente no tienen que ir llenando un poquito, ¿no? Para dónde es el TOEFL, ¿no? En este caso, to attend an English language school or program. Me imagino que la mayoría de ustedes es eso, o tal vez for a work, ¿no? A employment or a job. Y ustedes van describiendo cuál. Luego, información personal, ¿no? Your age, what is your current level of study, what is your next level of study, what is your desired field of study, ¿no? Y ahí van, esto es básicamente personal, cada uno lo va a ir llenando de manera personal. Entonces, no es nada complicado, solo lean bien las preguntas. Then we go next. And then they are basically here, they are explaining us that we are going to get some recipients. We can send the score to up to 4 different colleges. Or maybe in the case of a job, it's getting that information. Entonces, aquí básicamente lo que podemos hacer es llenar con los códigos que ustedes, si no lo tienen a la mano, lo pueden pedir a su universidad y ustedes anotan el código acá para que les llegue la nota a sus universidades. Entonces, aquí tomen en cuenta, pueden poner hasta 4 que son gratis y si necesitan más, tienen que pagar, si no me equivoco, es como 15 o 20 dólares extra. Esto aquí ustedes tienen que tomar la decisión si van a mandar esto así, ¿no es cierto? A ellos les va a llegar, incluso a veces les llega a ellos antes que a ustedes. Entonces tomen en cuenta eso. Porque si digamos no ponen el código aquí y lo quieren mandar después, les van a cobrar 15 o 20 dólares aproximadamente. Entonces vean ustedes si quieren hacerlo de una manera u otra. ¿Ok? Entonces, se recomienda que lo manden, ¿no? Pero tomen en cuenta que si no llegan a cumplir el score que se les pide, ¿no? Vean cómo podría reaccionar la universidad, ¿no es cierto? Pero también tomen en cuenta que si no ponen aquí, tal vez sí cumplieron el score que se les pedía, van a tener que pagar extra. Y entonces eso depende un poquito también de la seguridad que ustedes tienen al momento de tomar el test. Después, no, aquí pueden escoger cualquiera de las dos opciones, score, ¿no? Eso ya. Si quieren que se les mande su correo, que sea directamente, ¿no? El reporte online, ya depende de ustedes, ¿no? Le damos siguiente, revisamos la información, ¿no? Que tenemos, continuamos, next. Y aquí nos van a ofrecer comprarnos algunos paquetes, si desean lo pueden hacer, ¿no? Pueden revisar alguno tal vez que les llame la atención, ya depende de ustedes. Pero igual recuerden que tienen un practice, ¿no? Para trabajar con con la institución que están ahora, con Executive English. Si no están interesados en nada, le dan clic Next. Y aquí nos va a detallar, ¿no es cierto? Como saben, es 185 dólares. Y le damos, ¿no? Revisamos que la información esté bien, la fecha, la hora, etcétera. Lo registramos si desean. And we proceed to checkout. Y aquí básicamente, ¿no? Tenemos que ir llenando con la información de su tarjeta de crédito o débito para pagar. Ok, entonces básicamente es eso. Luego nos va a mandar a que paguemos, pongamos la información en la tarjeta. En el caso del Home Edition, no, ya salió. En el caso del Home Edition, básicamente tenemos más opciones. A ver, voy a ver si puedo ingresar rápidamente para mostrar a los estudiantes que quieren tomar el Home Edition. Pero tienen más oportunidades. Entonces, básicamente, pueden escoger la hora, el día. Como han visto, cuando hacen instituciones, por lo menos en Cochabamba, están con una por mes. Entonces, para más flexibilidad, si no pueden ese día o etcétera, convendría Home Edition. Okay, entonces aquí les voy a mostrar eso simplemente, no vamos a ir por todos los pasos. We're going to go with Home Edition and we're going to choose a date in there. We go next, continue. And as you can see here, we have many options, right? We can choose any, even from this month, well, this month. We can choose from April, as soon as April, right? Then we can choose a date, any date that is green, ¿no? Escogemos y ahí nosotros escogemos, miren las horas, es mucho más amplio. Entonces, no sé, pues podemos escoger 8 a.m. y ¿no? Nos da ahí el detalle del precio y básicamente nos registramos. Entonces, como han visto, es mucho más amplio el Home Edition y básicamente los pasos son los mismos para continuar. ¿Ya? Aquí igual la institución, etcétera, y nos va a mandar lo mismo. Ok. ¿Alguna pregunta al respecto? Pregunta, consulta, duda. Si tienen problemas para registrarse, nos pueden hacer saber después. Así les podemos colaborar y guiar un poquito. Okay, now we're going to check the information. Okay, how to register for the exam. Entonces ya hemos visto, ¿no es cierto? Básicamente, we have to create an account, select the date and location, and then you will get a confirmation. And remember that there's a limited number for participants. Entonces consideren eso porque de pronto se pueden confiar, pero después tal vez no se llenan los cupos. ¿Cuánto es el puntaje para aprobar? Eso lo ponen el lugar, la institución o el trabajo al que están yendo. Entonces, no hay una nota de aprobación, digamos. ¿No? El máximo de nota es 30 por sección, ¿no es cierto? La nota máxima sería 120, pero puede ser que te pidan un 85, 95, 110, dependiendo, ¿no? Pero no hay una fecha para, no hay un puntaje, perdón, Yuri. Okay, how much is it? As we already saw, how much is the TOEFL? It is $185. And it's very safe to pay with credit card. Entonces, no se preocupen por eso. When and where to expect the results? Where you will get an email to view your scores on your ETS account. And it takes between days to a week or so. ¿Ok? Entonces, ¿se entiende? ¿Alguna pregunta, alguna duda? ¿Se entiende? Tal vez alguna duda o consulta por ahí. Ok, entonces lo ideal ahorita sería que ustedes traten de ya nomás registrarse, ¿no es cierto? Si lo van a hacer en un instituto en especial, porque puede ser o no que les tome más tiempo, ¿no es cierto? Perdón. Puede ser que les tome más tiempo para registrarse. Ok, entonces si me dan un segundito para preparar, para mostrar el siguiente material. Ok, entonces ahora lo que vamos a hacer es, ya estoy ingresando a Magush, vamos a hacer un pequeño ejercicio de para practicar, ¿no? el listening, y vamos a iniciar con un lecture. Ok, un segundito por favor. Página. Se me acaba de colgar. Ok, entonces vamos a practicar. El listening. Vamos a hacer un lecture, ¿ya? Para ver cómo vamos. Ok, entonces ya les muestro. Disculpas por alguna razón mi computadora está bastante lento. Ok, entonces ahora lo que vamos a hacer es practicar nuevamente. Ok, esta vez vamos a tomar apuntes, por favor. Recuerden every time we take notes, we have to forget about vocals, right? And try to take as many notes as you can, because it's going to help us to answer the different type of questions that we have. Also, this is a lecture. Remember, we get either a lecture or a conversation. So lectures are usually a little bit longer. If I'm not wrong, this is about 4 minutes. Entonces, por favor, prepárense para tomar apuntes. You can have a piece of paper, a pencil, a pen. It's up to you. And if you're ready, we can start. Let me know if someone needs a little bit more time. I think I see everyone ready. Okay, great. We're going to start, and let's listen.
Listen to part of a lecture in a U.S. history class.
To fully understand the Cold War, to get why exactly relations between the U.S. and the Soviet Union were, well, so strained, we should take a step back first and look at earlier world events. We'll talk about World War II, of course, but let's start even before that, in the 1920s, to get a more complete picture. I'm sure you've all heard of the Roaring Twenties. It was a decade that saw tremendous political, economic, and social change in America. Those changes, they opened up more opportunities for industrial and economic growth. Restrictions that had been in place during World War I weren't applicable to growing businesses anymore in the 1920s. Now, new policies that encouraged big business were adopted. For example, tariffs. Tariffs were raised to the highest level on foreign goods to keep out competition. That means that products manufactured in America were more easily available to consumers, and so American industry flourished. The sense of security, the confidence, it was almost tangible. But that didn't last, of course. The country couldn't sustain that kind of economic growth, and in a way, it eventually brought about the stock market crash of 1929 and the Great Depression of the 1930s. The impact of the Great Depression not only weakened America's economy, but also other countries too. This is because trade with America dipped. Loans that had been given to countries like Germany after the First World War failed to bring economic stability. Ultimately, all that economic unrest gave power to extreme political movements like communism, fascism, and National Socialism, Nazism. Now, when war broke out in Europe in the late 30s, after Germany violated the World War I peace treaty, President Roosevelt announced that America would remain neutral. It was controversial, but the U.S. wasn't exactly looking to join any conflicts we could avoid at that point. Not after World War I. A surprising number of people today don't realize this, but America stayed out of the war in Europe for a full 2 years. We provided money and weaponry to some extent, but that's it. No manpower. And it was in those same 2 years that, well, Germany and its European allies took control of almost the entirety of Europe. But then things changed. It was Pearl Harbor, of course, the bombing on December 7th, 1941, that motivated America to join the war. The Pacific Fleet took a large hit in the surprise bombing, and on December 8th, America declared war on Japan. It was only 3 days later that Japan's allies, Germany and Italy, declared war against America. Now, I mention all this to set some context for the relationship between the Soviet Union and the United States at the time America joined the war. We were allies, but only strategically so. We shared an enemy. So Roosevelt joined the British and Soviet leaders, Winston Churchill and Joseph Stalin, in developing a military strategy. Those three leaders agreed that Germany's defeat should come before Japan's. Together, they began a military operation in North Africa in the summer of 1942. America not only contributed supplies to drive German and Italian soldiers out of North Africa and France, but also assisted the Soviets with soldiers for the first time in order to push German troops back into Europe. I won't linger on the details of the war, but On May 7th, 1945, Germany surrendered. Japan also formally surrendered on September 2nd, 1945, but at a great civilian cost, of course, with Hiroshima and Nagasaki both devastated by atomic bombs. I know some of you will have opinions on those bombings, so we'll talk about the ethical questions raised in another class later this month. In any case, the consequences of World War II were catastrophic, obviously. There were millions of displaced persons, an alarming death toll, and widespread destruction. But even if the fighting had stopped, the tension hadn't fully subsided. I mean, post-war disagreements between America and the Soviet Union, these disagreements paved the way for distrust and paranoia. With their common enemy defeated, the two countries no longer had to remain allies. Both rose from the aftermath of war as the dominant global powers. And at the same time, the military value of the atomic bomb was now indisputable. And that brings us to the Cold War.
Okay, great. Now, it was an academic content, right? It talks about a US history class. So it might be not as new, but remember that the topics are very random. So to kind of like put all our ideas together, we're going to listen one more time. Okay? Remember to take notes and summarize the information and try to write solo words so you don't write the whole sentence to make sense. Okay, so we're going to listen one more time and then we're going to see how you took your notes. Okay, so let's listen again.
Listen to part of a lecture in a U.S. history class.
To fully understand the Cold War, to get why exactly relations between the US and the Soviet Union were, well, so strained, we should take a step back first and look at earlier world events. We'll talk about World War II, of course, but let's start even before that, in the 1920s, to get a more complete picture. I'm sure you've all heard of the Roaring Twenties. It was a decade that saw tremendous political, economic, and social change in America. Those changes, they opened up more opportunities for industrial and economic growth. Restrictions that had been in place during World War I weren't applicable to growing businesses anymore in the 1920s. Now, new policies that encouraged big business were adopted. For example, tariffs. Tariffs were raised to the highest level on foreign goods to keep out competition. That means that products manufactured in America were more easily available to consumers, and so American industry flourished. The sense of security, the confidence, it was almost tangible. But that didn't last, of course. The country couldn't sustain that kind of economic growth, and in a way, it eventually brought about the stock market crash of 1929 and the Great Depression of the 1930s. The impact of the Great Depression not only weakened America's economy, but also other countries too. This is because trade with America dipped. Loans that had been given to countries like Germany after the First World War failed to bring economic stability. Ultimately, all that economic unrest gave power to extreme political movements like communism, fascism, and National Socialism, Nazism. Now, when war broke out in Europe in the late 30s, after Germany violated the World War I peace treaty, President Roosevelt announced that America would remain neutral. It was controversial, but the US wasn't exactly looking to join any conflicts we could avoid at that point. Not after World War I. A surprising number of people today don't realize this, but America stayed out of the war in Europe for a full 2 years. We provided money and weaponry to some extent, but that's it. No manpower. And it was in those same 2 years that, well, Germany and its European allies took control of almost the entirety of Europe. But then things changed. It was Pearl Harbor, of course, the bombing on December 7th, 1941, that motivated America to join the war. The Pacific Fleet took a large hit in the surprise bombing, and on December 8th, America declared war on Japan. It was only 3 days later that Japan's allies, Germany and Italy, declared war against America. Now, I mention all this to set some context for the relationship between the Soviet Union and the United States at the time America joined the war. We were allies, but only strategically so. We shared an enemy. So Roosevelt joined the British and Soviet leaders, Winston Churchill and Joseph Stalin, in developing a military strategy. Those three leaders agreed that Germany's defeat should come before Japan's. Together, they began a military operation in North Africa in the summer of 1942. America not only contributed supplies to drive German and Italian soldiers out of North Africa and France, but also assisted the Soviets with soldiers for the first time in order to push German troops back into Europe. I won't linger on the details of the war, but on May 7th, 1945, Germany surrendered. Japan also formally surrendered on September 2nd, 1945, but at a great civilian cost, of course, with Hiroshima and Nagasaki both devastated by atomic bombs. I know some of you will have opinions on those bombings, so we'll talk about the ethical questions raised in another class later this month. In any case, the consequences of World War II were catastrophic, obviously. There were millions of displaced persons, an alarming death toll, and widespread destruction. But even if the fighting had stopped, the tension hadn't fully subsided. I mean, post-war disagreements between America and the Soviet Union, these disagreements paved the way for distrust and paranoia. With their common enemy defeated, the two countries no longer had to remain allies. Both rose from the aftermath of war as the dominant global powers. And at the same time, the military value of the atomic bomb was now indisputable. And that brings us to the Cold War.
Okay, great. So in this part, the main thing, as I mentioned, obviously the listening is very long, right? And if you were good at history at school, you're probably a little bit familiarized with information, right? But if you weren't, maybe everything was new. So the topics are going to be the same. Maybe you heard something on the news or you read something on the newspapers and you're a little bit familiarized with. But if you haven't, you might be a little bit lost. Something that can help you to practice this, I'm going to mention this again because it is important. It's Anki. And while I'm doing this, please, if you can you take a picture of your notes and send it to the group so we can see and review a little bit. Sorry, a little bit of your notes. But while you do that, guys, just take a picture and send it to the group. I'm going to show you Anki. It's really, I'm going to keep talking about this because it's really going to help you to improve your, well, in this part, the spelling part, in the listening, you can grow your vocabulary. And sometimes we might understand, not something, a text, whatever, but sometimes when we don't understand words, it's going to kind of like put us stop every time we read because we take a second or two to think about that word. And that's why it's going to help us to have more vocabulary, especially if you haven't taken or seen the connectors videos. You should also watch that. Because most of the words, you know, in proper or lectures, etc., is going to use connectors. Most of them. Every single idea is going to be connected with the next idea with connectors, such as, for instance, exemplifying, on top of that, accordingly, or I don't know, you know, any connectors. So it will be good for you guys to start growing your vocabulary in connectors. So I have already someone that just sent. We're going to take a look. And the rest of you guys, please, if you can do the same. We're going to check. So the first one I think is Christians. So we see there, if you can take a look. Well, you did good. I barely see some vocals, right? And I'm sure you can, the Cold War, US versus Russia, some dates, some numbers. Looks good. What do you think, guys? I don't think it's as easy to understand to the rest of you, but I'm sure Christian can understand it. And remember, if you can, no, I know it's not for everyone. Sé que para algunos tal vez tomar sus apuntes de su propia manera es mucho mejor y mucho más cómodo, pero también una forma de poder organizar la idea es, si queremos, ¿no?, tomar diferentes espacios en la hoja para ir escribiendo ideas distintas, digamos, ¿no? Un poquito para ir clasificando la información. Si desean hacerlo así, ideal, y si no les funciona mucho, tampoco, ¿no? Pero es simplemente un consejo. Si alguien más puede compartir tal vez sus apuntes, por favor, simplemente para ver más o menos cómo estamos haciendo. Y a ver, Christian, what do you think about the topic? Was it hard to understand? Was it easy?
I think we all heard about Cold War, Second World War, but I think the hard part was the background that the professor talked about when he talked about at the end of World War II, World War One, I think, First World War, and the events that made that the US didn't take a part on World War II at the beginning. So I think that was interesting.
It was actually, even if you watch any movie or documentary related with the topic, I'm sure you kind of like understand the whole thing. But it sometimes it's going to be like that with the audios, and sometimes it is going to be something completely new. But as you saw, the information, you are always going to give the whole information in the listening in this case. Or if it's a passage, same thing. Toda la información siempre la van a encontrar, o en el texto si es un reading, o en un audio si es listening. Estoy tratando de encontrar otro para practicar una vez más, pero si me pueden pasar por favor al grupo. Creo que, no sé si nos está sincronizando, pero solo me ha llegado de Cristian. Para darle un vistazo, chicos, por favor. Estoy revisando. Me confirman, pero solo tengo de Cristian. Y ahora vamos a practicar con uno más. Y a ver cómo nos va con esto. En este caso vamos a escuchar solo una vez, ¿ya? Porque ya el tiempo no nos va a dar. Este es otro passage. Entonces vamos a escuchar, ¿ok? Por favor, si pueden ir mandando, sí, os voy viendo igual mientras ustedes escuchan. Ok, we're going to listen another one.
Listen to part of a lecture in a world history class. Most of you had lunch right before this class, didn't you? Well, I did too. I kept my lunch pretty simple. A sandwich, a cola, and some fruit. And I got to thinking how convenient food is for all of us. We don't have to catch our food or find it. Sometimes we don't even have to prepare it. We can just buy it. But things weren't always that way. In very ancient times, everyone got their food, well, most of their food, from hunting wild animals and gathering fruits and vegetables that grew naturally. As you've probably noticed, hunting and gathering is not the main way most people get their food these days. Instead, we get almost everything we eat from grocery stores, right? And the food you find in the grocery store, or sometimes the ingredients in the food, originally come from farms. But how did farming start? What archaeologists have found is that the origins of agriculture are scattered across the globe. We see evidence of early farming all around the world, starting about 15,000 years ago during the Neolithic Age, the time period when humans first began to use tools, create art, that sort of thing, started to act more like modern humans. So earlier in the Neolithic, we see signs of agriculture, but only the farming of plants. We see the first signs that plants were actually cultivated, deliberately grown and bred to be different from wild plants. We can tell that the plants were cultivated because they produced more food, better food for human populations than their wild predecessors. The grain plants yielded more grain. The fruit trees grew bigger fruits, and the seeds more closely resembled the seeds of modern domestic plants. You see, even hunter-gatherers would sometimes care for wild plants, water a tree, or grow berry bushes. But real agriculture started when humans began to grow their own plants, deliberately breeding them to be different from wild ones. And in the early to mid-Neolithic, we see this kind of behavior popping up in a lot of different places. Cultivated rice in Central Asia, selectively bred squash in Mesoamerica, figs and grain in the Middle East. But that was just plants. You see, mainly plants. The other key part of human agriculture, large-scale farming of animals, didn't come till later. Oh, sure, there was some limited domestication earlier in the Neolithic, some taming of dogs, sheep, goats. But this was a very minor aspect of farming at first. As agriculture continued into the late Neolithic, we saw farm animals take center stage alongside plants. Humans started breeding the smaller animals, the dogs, sheep, goats, more than ever. And the animals became more different from wild animals than before. Sheep began to grow more wool for farmers' clothing. Goats were bred to give more milk and give to produce more meat. Farm dogs began to have the instinct to herd animals, not hunt them the way wild dogs would. Remember, this is one of the first signs of true agriculture. Selectively cultivating plants and selectively breeding animals. Animals began to become very important. Humans even began to develop pastoral communities, groups of people who all worked together to tend animals for food. With more people working together to manage farm animals, there was an especially noticeable rise in two types of animals that can be a lot of work: cows and pigs. Beef, the stuff lots of farms all over the world still churn out today. This is where farming really came together, with pastoral communities. Farming as a whole started to take on the basic features of modern agriculture. People began to organize communities around farming and around systems that distributed the farmed food, gave the food to everyone in the community. These were small settlements at first, but soon, pastoral communities turned into something far bigger: agricultural civilization, based on the farming of both animals and plants, started happening on a large scale. We started to see lots of states with governments and modern social organization based on agricultural food production. There were rulers who made the laws about how and where the food was grown and how it was distributed. There were various specialists to grow food, store food, prepare food, manage animals or plants, make farming tools, build roads and buildings, and so on. People finally began organizing into complex societies like the ones we have today.
Okay, great. Entonces, igual si me pueden mandar, por favor, así revisamos ya en los últimos minutos de la clase. I got a picture from, I think it's Andreas. Let's check. Take a look. Economic, Germany. Yeah, looks good. You even divide the page to do some different ideas about the same topic, I guess. But we could summarize a little bit more. Believe me, guys, if you try to don't write vocals while you're taking notes, It's going to cut your note, take noting times at half, at least. Ok, entonces, si hay alguien más, a ver, vamos a revisar si ha llegado algún otro mensaje. WhatsApp, como siempre, ayudando. Okay, 02. Okay, great. We're already saw Christians. No, this is a new. Okay, let's see. Okay, good. Looks good. Lunch and GTS, dog. Right. And what do you think, guys, about this topic? Was it easier or harder?
Harder, I think.
Harder? Why?
I think that he was keep talking about the same.
Redundando mucho?
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes they do that. Well, when you get a conversation, it's a little bit easier. But with the lectures, it's always going to be a little bit more proper, trying to give as many details as they can. So as soon as you get to understand some categories about something, you can start taking notes on that. No? And then you can go back if you want to. But well, it really depends, as you saw, right? We got various types of topics. Okay, great. So guys, it's already 7:58. I'm going to send the lunch of the polling for today. If you can answer, please. We have 5 people in the meeting. And I'm going to let you know when everyone has answered. Let me see. 2, 3, 2 people is missing. Please, if you can answer, then we can finish with that.
Peter, can you send it again? I didn't get the pool.
You didn't get it? That's weird. Anyone else have trouble with it? Maybe you cancel it by mistake. That's weird. I think someone else, maybe it's missing 3, 4. Okay, it's fine. Don't worry. I'm not sure if I can get to send it again. Relaunch. I think everyone is going to. Lo voy a borrar todo. No te preocupes. Okay, it's fine. I'm going to take a screenshot. Bye, guys. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye.
Yeah.
Bye. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, guys.